A gold pen hovers over a $100 billion contract, held by a man who thinks he has lost everything that matters. At that same moment, a 7-year-old girl with the exact same piercing eyes is digging through a trash bin for a plastic bottle. Meet Kang Tae-Hyun. He owns the city, but he doesn't know his greatest treasure is currently begging on its cold streets. 7 years ago, his newborn daughter was declared dead, but she didn't die. She was stolen, abandoned in a forest, and raised in the shadows. Today, a chance encounter is about to turn a ruthless mafia boss into a desperate father, and a $100 billion lie is about to come crashing down. If you are ready to see a cold empire transformed by the power of truth and a father's love, subscribe to our channel right now and hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. We want to hear from you. What would you do if you found out your own family had betrayed you for money? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us which city or country you are watching from. See you in the next story. The luxury hospital sat high on a hill, its glass walls shining like diamonds under the moon. Inside, the air was quiet and smelled of expensive flowers. Kang Tae-Hyun sat by his wife's bed, holding her hand. Han Seo-rin was finally asleep after the long birth of their daughter. Tae-Hyun looked at the small, sleeping baby in the plastic crib. He felt a warmth he had never known before. For a man who ruled a business empire with a heart of stone, this tiny girl was his only soft spot. He reached out to touch her tiny hand, marveling at how something so small could make him feel so powerful, and yet so humble. He promised right then to protect her from every shadow in the world. He didn't see the shadow moving in the hallway. His brother, Kang Do-Joon, stood behind the heavy door, his eyes filled with a dark jealousy. To Do-Joon, this baby wasn't a niece, she was a barrier. If she lived, she would inherit the $100 billion fortune he wanted for himself. He watched through the glass, his jaw tight with anger. He felt that he deserved the empire more than his brother, and he certainly wasn't going to let a newborn child take it all away. He had already set his plan in motion, paying off people who were supposed to be loyal to the family. Later that night, when Tae-Hyun was called away for an urgent business matter, a nurse named Park Hae-jin entered the room. Her hands were shaking as she looked at the monitors. She had been paid a massive amount of money by Do-Joon to do something unthinkable. She was supposed to take the baby to the deep forest and make sure she never came back. The weight of the bribe in her bag felt like a heavy stone, pulling at her conscience. She looked at the sleeping mother, Han Seo-rin, and felt a pang of guilt, but the fear of Do-Joon and the lure of the money were too strong to ignore. Nurse Park picked up the sleeping infant. The baby was so light, like a feather. As she hurried through the back exits of the hospital, she felt the heavy weight of the money in her pocket and the even heavier weight of the crime on her heart. Every sound in the hallway made her jump, thinking someone would catch her. She slipped out into the cold night air and moved toward her car, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She drove far away from the city lights, deep into the dark woods. The trees looked like giants in the night, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. She stopped the car and walked into the forest, the leaves crunching under her feet. She was supposed to end the baby's life right there, but as the moon caught the child's face, the nurse stopped. The baby opened her eyes and let out a tiny, soft breath. Nurse Park couldn't do it. She couldn't kill someone so innocent, no matter how much money she was offered. Instead, she found a small, sheltered pathway hidden by tall grass. She wrapped the baby tightly in her soft silk blanket and laid her down gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "May the world be kinder to you than I was." She took one last look at the child before turning away, tears blurring her vision. The nurse ran back to her car, leaving the true heir of the Kang Empire alone in the shadows. Hours later, a poor woman searching for wood would hear a faint cry. But back at the hospital, the lie was already being told. Tae-Hyun returned to find his wife screaming and his brother pretending to cry. They told him the baby was gone, taken by a sudden illness. The night of shadows had begun, and a father's heart was broken, unaware that his daughter was still breathing under the stars. 7 years had passed, and the world was a very different place for those within the Kang Empire. For Kang Tae-Hyun, the time had been cold and lonely. He worked through the days and nights, building his $100 billion business into a mountain of steel and glass. He was the most powerful man in the city, but his house was silent. His wife, Han Seo-rin, still looked at the empty nursery with sad eyes, her heart never truly healing from the night they were told their baby had died. On the other side of the city, in a neighborhood where the buildings were broken and the streets were dusty, a young girl named Kang Tae-Hyun lived a very different life. She did not know about luxury hospitals or billion-dollar contracts. She only knew the weight of the heavy bag she carried. Every morning, Jaya went out with the woman she called mother, the kind soul who had found her in the forest 7 years ago. Together, they wandered the streets, picking up empty water cans and plastic bottles from waste bins to sell for a few coins. One rainy afternoon, Tae-Hyun decided to walk through the city instead of taking his private car. He wanted to see the streets he owned. He wore an expensive black coat, and his face was hard and serious. As he turned a corner, he saw a small girl sitting on a cardboard box. She was wearing a thin, oversized jacket, and her face was smudged with dirt, but her eyes were bright and familiar. Jaya was holding a small piece of bread, sharing it with her mother. When she saw the tall, rich man standing there, she did not run away. Instead, she stood up and walked toward him. She held out a small, shiny marble she had found in the trash. "You look sad, mister," she said in a soft, clear voice. "Do you want my lucky stone?" Tae-Hyun froze. He looked down at the girl's face and felt a strange shock go through his body, like a bolt of lightning. She had the same piercing eyes as his wife. She had the same stubborn chin that he saw in the mirror every morning. For the first time in 7 years, the ice around his heart started to melt. He did not know why, but he felt an unexplainable bond with this child who had nothing. He looked at the poor woman standing behind the girl. They were homeless and hungry, yet the girl was trying to give him a gift. Tae-Hyun reached out and took the marble. His hand was shaking. He knew he could not just walk away. He decided right then to bring them both back to his mansion to give them a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. He did not know it yet, but he had just found the treasure he thought was lost forever. The iron gates of the Kang mansion opened slowly, revealing a world that Jaya and her mother had only ever seen in picture books. As the black car drove up the long, winding path, Jaya pressed her face against the window. She saw green grass that looked like a velvet carpet and fountains that tossed sparkling water high into the air. Beside her, her mother sat very still, her hands trembling as she adjusted her worn, dusty clothes. They felt like two small birds that had suddenly been invited into a golden cage. When the car stopped, Kang Tae-Hyun stepped out and held the door open for them. He led them through the massive front doors into a hallway filled with white marble and golden lights. The air inside was warm and smelled like vanilla. Jaya looked down at her muddy sneakers and then at the spotless floor. She felt afraid to take a single step, but Tae-Hyun gave her a small, encouraging nod. His face was still serious, but his eyes were no longer cold. "This will be your home now," Tae-Hyun said, his voice echoing in the large room. He called for the house staff, who looked surprised to see a billionaire bringing homeless strangers into his palace. He ordered them to prepare the finest guest rooms and to bring the best clothes they could find. He also asked for a doctor to check on the mother's health, as she looked very tired and weak. Han Seo-rin, Tae-Hyun's wife, walked down the stairs just as they arrived. She stopped mid-step, her breath catching in her throat as she looked at Jaya. For a moment the room was completely silent. Seo-rin didn't see a dirty street child. She saw a face that looked exactly like the one she had dreamed of for 7 long years. She felt a sharp pull in her chest, a mother's instinct that she couldn't explain. Tears filled her eyes as she watched Jaya tilt her head with curiosity. "Tae-Hyun, who is this?" Seo-rin whispered, her voice shaking. "I found them in the city," he replied simply. "They have nowhere to go, and I couldn't leave them behind." That evening, Jaya and her mother had their first warm bath in years. They were given soft, clean clothes that felt like clouds against their skin. Jaya wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes sparkle. When they sat down at the long dining table, Jaya's eyes grew wide at the sight of so much food. There were steaming bowls of soup, fresh bread, and sweet fruits. She looked at Tae-Hyun and Seo-rin, who were watching her with a mix of sadness and wonder. Jaya didn't know why these rich people were being so kind to her. She didn't know that every time she smiled, she was healing a hole in their hearts. As she ate, she felt a sense of safety she had never known. She was no longer a wandering girl in the rain. She was a child in a home filled with light. However, deep in the shadows of the mansion, someone else was watching. Kang Do-Joon stood in the doorway, his face pale with fear. He recognized the girl's face immediately, and he knew that his $100 billion secret was in danger of being found. The golden lights of the mansion usually made Kang Do-Joon feel powerful, but tonight, they felt like spotlights showing his crimes. He stood at the edge of the dining room, hidden by the shadows of a large stone pillar. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He watched as his brother, Tae-Hyun, reached out to wipe a smudge of soup from the little girl's cheek. He saw how his sister-in-law, Seorin, couldn't stop looking at the child with a mix of hope and pain. Do-Joon felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He knew that face. Even though 7 years had passed, the girl looked exactly like the baby he had ordered to be removed. She had the same small, straight nose and the same shape of eyes as the Kang family. He had paid Nurse Park a fortune to make sure this child disappeared forever. He had been told the baby was left in the forest to face the cold. How could she be sitting here, in the heart of the empire, eating dinner at his brother's table? He felt a wave of pure panic. If Tae-Hyun ever found out the truth, Do-Joon wouldn't just lose the $100 billion inheritance, he would lose his life. His brother was a man who didn't forgive or forget. Do-Joon stepped back into the hallway, his mind racing. He needed to find out who this girl was and where she came from. Most importantly, he needed to make sure she and her mother left the mansion before anyone started asking questions. As he hurried toward his own office, he bumped into one of the maids. "Watch where you are going," he snapped, his voice sharp with fear. He closed his door and locked it, leaning his back against the wood. He took out his phone and tried to call a number he hadn't dialed in years, the number for Nurse Park. It went straight to a dead line. "This can't be happening," he whispered to the empty room. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark gardens. He had spent 7 years pretending to be a grieving uncle. He had sat through dinners talking about the tragedy of the lost baby. He had built his entire future on a lie that was now sitting just one floor below him. Do-Joon realized that he couldn't just get rid of her like he did before. Tae-Hyun was already protective of the girl. He saw the way his brother looked at her. It was the first time Tae-Hyun had looked happy in years. Any move Do-Joon made had to be very careful. He decided he would pretend to be a kind uncle to the girl while searching for a way to prove she was just a random stranger from the streets. He had to convince Tae-Hyun that the resemblance was just a coincidence. But as he remembered the way Jae smiled, a smile that was a perfect copy of Seorin's, his hands began to shake again. The $100 billion secret was no longer buried in a forest. It was living in his house, and the clock was ticking. The morning sun filled the mansion with a soft, golden light that made everything look peaceful. Jae spent her first full day exploring the giant house with wide, curious eyes. Everything was so different from the cold streets. The carpets felt like soft moss under her feet, and the walls were covered in beautiful paintings. Han Seorin followed the little girl from a short distance, her heart feeling fuller than it had in years. She loved watching Jae's face light up every time she found something new. Later that afternoon, they ended up in a quiet room at the end of a long hallway. This was the library, filled with thousands of books and old memories. Jae climbed onto a small stool to look at a shelf filled with leather-bound albums. As she reached for one, a small, loose photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor like a falling leaf. Jae hopped down and picked it up, tilting her head as she looked at the image. "Look, Mommy Seorin," Jae said, using the name she had shyly started to call the woman. "This lady has a mark just like mine." Seorin walked over and took the faded photograph from the girl's small hand. It was a picture of Seorin herself when she was a teenager, sitting in a summer garden. In the photo, Seorin's hair was pulled back, clearly showing a tiny, butterfly-shaped birthmark behind her left ear. Seorin felt the world around her start to spin. Her breath caught in her throat as she slowly turned Jae around. With trembling fingers, Seorin pushed back the girl's soft, dark hair. There, in the exact same spot behind her left ear, was a tiny, dark, butterfly-shaped birthmark. It was a perfect match. Seorin dropped the photograph, and it landed on the rug. She sank to her knees and pulled Jae into a tight, desperate hug. She began to cry, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of a mother who had finally found the missing piece of her soul. "My sweet girl," Seorin whispered into Jaya's hair. I knew it was you. I felt it the moment I saw you. Jaya didn't fully understand why Seorin was crying, but she felt a warm, safe feeling spread through her chest. She wrapped her small arms around Seorin's neck and held on tight. She felt like she had finally found where she truly belonged. She didn't feel like a wandering girl anymore. She felt loved. While they held each other, Kang Tae-Hyun walked into the library. He saw his wife on the floor, weeping and holding the child. He saw the faded photograph lying on the ground. He picked up the picture and looked at the birthmark in the photo, then at the matching mark on Jaya. His face, which was usually as hard as stone, cracked with emotion. He realized that the coincidence he had felt in his heart was actually the truth. He knelt down beside them, his large hand resting gently on Jaya's back. For 7 years, he had lived in a world of shadows and lies, believing his daughter was gone. Now, looking at that faded photograph and the little girl in front of him, he knew he had to find out what really happened that night at the hospital. He felt a protective fire burn inside him. He would not let anyone hurt his family ever again. The truth was now a fire burning in Kang Tae-Hyun's heart. He could not sit still while a mystery hung over his family. After seeing the matching birthmarks, he spent the entire night using his vast resources to find the person who held the key to the past. By sunrise, his private investigators had found a lead. Nurse Park Hae-jin was no longer working in big hospitals. She was living a quiet, lonely life in a small house near the edge of the city, hiding from a ghost she had carried for 7 years. Tae-Hyun did not send his guards. He went alone, driving his black car through the narrow streets until he reached a faded wooden door. When he knocked, the woman who opened it looked much older than her years. Her face was thin, and her eyes were filled with a constant, twitching fear. The moment she saw Tae-Hyun's cold, demanding gaze, she knew the day she had been dreading had finally arrived. She didn't even try to run. She simply stepped aside and let him in. The house was dark and filled with old newspapers. Tae-Hyun did not waste time. He stood in the center of the small room, his presence making the walls feel like they were closing in. 7 years ago, you told me my daughter died, he said, his voice as sharp as a knife. But I have seen a girl with my wife's eyes and a butterfly mark. Tell me the truth, or you will never see the sun again. Nurse Park fell to her knees, her body shaking with heavy sobs. The secret was too heavy to hold anymore. It was your brother, she cried out, her voice cracking. Kang Do-Joon paid me a fortune. He told me the baby had to go so he could be the only heir. He told me to take her to the forest and end her life. Tae-Hyun's knuckles turned white as he gripped the back of a wooden chair. He felt a wave of cold fury. His own brother had tried to kill his flesh and blood for money. I couldn't do it, the nurse whispered, looking at the floor. She was so beautiful. I left her on a path where I hoped someone would find her. I lied to you and your wife because I was scared of what Do-Joon would do to me. I took the money, but I have never spent a single cent of it. It felt like blood money. She reached into a dusty drawer and pulled out a small, old notebook. Inside were the dates, the bank records of the payments from Do-Joon, and a photo she had secretly taken of the baby before leaving her in the woods. This was the proof Tae-Hyun needed. It was the final nail in the coffin of his brother's lies. Tae-Hyun took the notebook and walked out of the house without saying another word. His mind was racing. He thought of his wife's broken heart and his daughter's years of living in the dirt. Every second Jaya spent picking up cans was a second stolen by his own brother. As he drove back to the mansion, the cold Mafia Boss was gone. In his place was a father who was ready to protect his home and make sure the person who hurt his family finally paid the price. The notebook from the nurse was powerful, but Kang Tae-Hyun knew he needed one more thing before he could act. In his world of business and law, he needed proof that no one could argue with. He needed the science of blood to back up the memories of the heart. He decided to run a secret DNA test to confirm once and for all that Jaya was his biological daughter. He had to be careful, as he did not want to alert his brother or overwhelm the little girl before he was ready to tell her everything. The next morning, Tae-Hyun sat in the sun-filled breakfast room, watching Jaya eat a bowl of sweet strawberries. She looked so happy and safe in her new blue dress. Jaya, he said softly, leaning toward her. There is a small tangle in your hair. May I help you brush it? Jae-ah nodded and gave him a bright smile. As Tae-Hyun gently ran a soft brush through her dark hair, he carefully collected a few strands that had come loose. He tucked them into a small, clean plastic bag hidden in his pocket. Later that day, he went to his wife's room and found a hairbrush she had used that morning. He took a few strands of Han Seo-rin's hair as well. He drove personally to a private laboratory that he owned. He didn't use his regular name. He used a secret code that only the head scientist understood. He handed over the samples and told them he needed the results in hours, not days. Money could buy many things, and today it bought him speed. While he waited, Tae-Hyun returned to the mansion. He found his brother, Do-Joon, sitting in the lounge, drinking tea and acting as if nothing was wrong. Do-Joon even tried to joke with Jae-ah, offering her a toy. Tae-Hyun watched his brother with cold, steady eyes. It was hard not to reach out and grab him right then, but he waited. He needed the final paper in his hand. Late that evening, a secure message flashed on Tae-Hyun's phone. It was a digital file from the lab. He opened it with shaking fingers. His eyes skipped past the complicated scientific words and went straight to the bottom of the page. The result was 99.9%. There was no doubt. Jae-ah was the child who had been stolen from them. She was the $100 billion heiress, the girl who had been forced to beg for bread while her father sat on a throne of gold. Tae-Hyun stood in his dark office, looking out at the city lights. He felt a mix of pure joy and burning anger. The secret was finally out in the light. He thought about how Jae-ah's life was about to change forever. She would never have to look for another water can or worry about where her next meal would come from. But first, he had to settle the score with the man who had tried to destroy them all. He gripped his phone so hard the screen almost cracked. The DNA did not lie, and now, neither would the future. The time for secrets was over. Kang Tae-Hyun decided to hold a grand family dinner in the main dining hall. He made sure the room was filled with the brightest lights and the most delicious food. He invited his brother, Do-Joon, to sit at the long table, acting as if everything was normal. Tae-Hyun sat at the head of the table, his face calm, while his wife, Seo-rin, sat next to Jae-ah. Jae-ah looked like a little princess in a new white dress, her eyes sparkling as she talked about the books she was learning to read. Do-Joon seemed nervous, but he tried to hide it with a fake smile. He kept glancing at Jae-ah, then back at his brother. He didn't know that Tae-Hyun had already placed a small, silver recorder on the table, hidden under a silk napkin. He also didn't know that the notebook from Nurse Park and the DNA results were tucked inside Tae-Hyun's jacket pocket, right next to his heart. "You seem quiet tonight, brother," Tae-Hyun said, his voice smooth and steady. "Are you worried about the future of our company, or perhaps you are thinking about the past?" Do-Joon laughed nervously and took a sip of water. "The past is gone, Tae-Hyun. We should only look forward to the great things we will build together." Tae-Hyun leaned forward, the light catching his sharp eyes. "Is that so? I was thinking about the night Jae-ah was born. Do you remember how you cried when the doctors said she was gone? You were so convincing. You almost made me believe that you cared about my family more than the money." The room went cold. Do-Joon's smile faded and his face turned the color of chalk. "I don't know what you mean," he whispered. "That was a tragedy for all of us." Tae-Hyun slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded notebook. He slid it across the table toward his brother. Do-Joon's eyes widened as he saw the handwriting of Nurse Park and the records of the payments he had made. His hands began to shake so hard that his fork clattered against his plate. "I visited the nurse," Tae-Hyun said, his voice growing deeper and more dangerous. "She told me everything. She told me how you paid her to leave a baby in the forest. She told me how you wanted to be the only heir to the $100 billion empire." Do-Joon jumped up from his chair, knocking it over. "She's lying. She's just a crazy woman trying to get money." Tae-Hyun didn't move. He simply pulled out the DNA report and laid it on the table. "The blood does not lie, Do-Joon. Jae-ah is my daughter. You tried to kill my child." Seo-rin stood up and pulled Jae-ah close to her, her eyes filled with fire. Do-Joon looked around the room, realizing he was trapped. The house guards, who were always loyal to Tae-Hyun, stepped out from the shadows and blocked every exit. Do-Joon sank back down, his face crumbling. He realized that the Mafia Boss hadn't just invited him to dinner, he had invited him to his own downfall. The traitor was finally caught in his own web of lies, and there was nowhere left to run. The morning after the big dinner, the mansion felt lighter than it ever had before. The heavy clouds of sadness that had hung over the house for 7 years were finally gone. Kang Do-Joon had been taken away, stripped of his titles and his share of the fortune. He would never be allowed to step foot in the Kang Empire again. With the traitor gone, the air felt fresh and clean, as if a great storm had passed. Kang Tae-Hyun stood on the wide stone balcony, watching the sun rise over the city. He wasn't thinking about business meetings or bank accounts. He was watching Jaya run across the green grass of the garden below. She was chasing a colorful butterfly, her laughter echoing through the trees. For the first time, Tae-Hyun realized that his real empire wasn't made of money or tall glass buildings. His true wealth was the safety and happiness of his family. He turned to see Han Seo-rin walking toward him. She looked beautiful and peaceful. She wasn't the grieving woman from the past anymore. She was a mother who had her daughter back. Behind her, the woman who had found Jaya in the forest stood shyly. Tae-Hyun had made sure that the scavenger mother would never have to worry about a single thing again. She was now an official member of the household, the woman who had saved the Kang bloodline when no one else would. Tae-Hyun walked down to the garden and knelt on the grass as Jaya ran up to him. She didn't see a scary mafia boss, she saw her father. She threw her small arms around his neck and gave him a big hug. "Are we going to stay here forever, Daddy?" Jaya asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. "Yes, Jaya," Tae-Hyun said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are home. No more wandering and no more cold nights. This house belongs to you." He kept his word. In the months that followed, Tae-Hyun changed the way he did business. He used his billions to build modern schools and clean housing for families who lived on the streets, just like Jaya once did. He wanted to make sure that no other invisible child was ever forgotten. He became a man who protected the weak instead of just ruling the strong. The story of the lost girl who became a princess spread throughout the city. It reminded everyone that the truth always finds a way to come into the light. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the three of them stood together in the garden, a father, a mother, and a daughter. The silence of the mansion was gone, replaced by the happy sounds of a family that was finally whole. The wandering was over. The real empire had finally begun. Thank you for following the incredible journey of Tae-Hyun and Jaya. Their story proves that love is more powerful than any lie, and that a family's bond can never truly be broken. If you were moved by this tale of redemption and justice, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment of the story? Do you think Tae-Hyun was right to be merciful to the woman who raised Jaya? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us which city or country you are watching from. See you in the next story.